Some of the best memories I have revolve around food. Food is a form of expression, a way to break bread, laugh, and share around the dinner table among friends and family. Food is my love language. Cooking and baking are a way I connect with those around me. In Kentucky, I met a fellow food extraordinaire. We would swap recipes, talk for hours during food prep, and sometimes the onions would even make our eyes sweat. We take for granted how simple the act of cooking is until one day, the thing that brings you joy is stifled, and your connections with the outside world start to dwindle. It's that moment when you realize your passion for the things that give you passion stop, and it's time to face the mirror. Asking yourself only one question: is your body and mind aligned and at peace with one another? If not, it may be time for an intervention. Hey there, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Paulina Butska, and you are watching and listening, and that's okay. Today, we are joined by CJ Daniels, and CJ is a dear friend of mine who we met in Kentucky when we were working at the station together. You don't see him on TV. He does all the behind-the-scenes work for our web. So if you are ever scrolling, through our website, he's writing most of the content. So go past the headline, make sure to click and read the article because they are well written and they are written by the one and only CJ Daniels. Last year, 2020, I took a mental health leave when I was working in Kentucky in Louisville. And it was when I was going through my separation. I was really in a tough spot and I needed to take time. So I took the maximum amount of time that I could, came to New York City, stayed with family, and I didn't know what was killing me, right? I was like, I need to step away from this. Is it my marriage, which was clearly killing me? Yes. Or was it my news job? And really, it was a combination of both. And it was such a step that I needed to take in order to take a step back and really assess the situation and figure out what I wanted to do next, or if I wanted to stay in news. But you have had a very similar journey, I find, not in the abuse or the marriage part, but kind of in the mental health struggle that you have found yourself kind of dealing with as you navigate through news.
Last year, I think it was a difficult year for, everybody. 2020, the Pandora's box then it just exploded. You had the social justice protest. You had people being quarantined at home due to the coronavirus and, the isolation away from family. A lot of us, we were separated. So it was like working alone and being alone. And
not a single person.
When you're alone in your thoughts, that opens up a whole new can of worms. And I learned that a great deal last year. I never thought I would be the one to, suffer, a mental breakdown. Because I'm always thought to as the strong one and the nurturing one. But I found myself just falling apart piece by piece. I'm used to being in settings to where I'm communicating with people and where, I'm sharing, my thoughts and feelings. And when I couldn't do that, it did a lot to me. And it was like a first for me to experience something like that.
In our conversation, CJ, because we worked very closely, we were the weekend warriors at HAS, right?
That's right.
I got cool. Welcome to Podcast Life. This is great. We were weekend warriors. And so we had a very tight-knit group on the weekend. It really was just, you're kind of dealing with a lot of things that normally in a newsroom during the day we would not be dealing with, but on the weekend it seems to kind of everything that could go wrong always does go wrong kind of thing.
Exactly.
And you're just kind of running and gunning to make sure that you can kind of put out all the little fires that are coming up. Before 2020, you were already suffering with some mental health problems, right? I think that the 2020 really what it did for everybody was it exacerbated everyone's kind of capacity to handle the trauma that was happening in the world at this point, because it's not only in the US, right? This is a worldwide trauma that everybody's going through. And, I called it the year of perfect vision. And it really, really, for in many instances for myself, and I think for many people, it was, whether it was good 2020 vision or bad 2020 vision, whatever the vision you needed to see, it happened, right? Like 2020
Right.
was the year that was going to happen. What was it from 2019, I guess, into 2020 that pushed you over the edge that said, I need to start seeking help for what I'm going through?
It's probably a litany of things that built up over, the years. When we get to a certain point, in our lives, like I am, in my early 40s, and we expect to be, at a certain, level, like, I guess, level of success, meaning, being in a good place financially, being in a good place, in your career. The more that I, just sat back and like thought about those things, it just sent me, into that negative space. And it's like, I'm seeing all these people doing great things and, getting all these accolades and, being praised for their success. And I'm like, I've been 10 years deep into news and I'm like, I don't have anything to show for it. It's not that I hadn't put into work, because I put into long hours, the constant weekends, and, just doing everything that I could to, make sure that I stood out, like a sore thumb, which isn't hard to do. But I just felt like not having that success, it like kind of played into everything that was going on, with the pandemic. And it's like, why am I sitting here, not making the money that I should be making, or not being promoted to a new leadership role, or just things like that. And just kept playing with my psyche. And it just sent me into like this dark place, this like depression. And I'm like, oh my God, I've never felt like this before. It's like, is something wrong with me? I'm like, well, what is it? And I found myself, just isolating like even more, when we were in the pandemic. We were already separated, but you go in the house and you close the blinds. That was like me. I closed the blinds, turned off the phone, rarely said anything to anybody. And that just, it made matters worse. And I shouldn't have done that. But I mean, it was just, just crazy to me to not really know what I was going through. And I think the moment that I suffered like that break was last July, when, I was going to change careers. I was, hyping myself up, making just like crazy, erratic decisions. I'm like, oh no, something just does not feel right. And I just, just had a big meltdown and just like fell apart, up late at night crying for like 2 weeks straight. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, oh my God, all this stuff lingering, from the past, and, just thinking about, not being successful enough or good enough, that it was a lot. It was a lot. And that just caused me to like just head into a tailspin that I've never experienced before.
For people who are not in news, you put in a tremendous amount of work, and um, without you helping us journalists, who are usually the face of what you are doing,
Mhm.
we would not all work. I mean, everything would not work in terms of digital or online social media. The content that everybody is reading online does not work without you, right? So although you're not getting those accolades for it, or like the pats on the back, I want you to know that here from everybody, or myself, just giving you a thank you, because you and the team of digital that we do have at every station that I've worked at, you guys really are the unsung heroes, along with our producers, along with so many other people that people
Mhm.
watching TV will never see. So there's a big thank you to that I wanted to kind of point out before we
Oh,
kind of
thank
move
you.
on. Past that, I think so often I know that with myself, I've been battling depression since my dad's suicide. And I think that it's something that is, I guess, chronic, I guess you could call it. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I don't feel like I'm always, I'm not always down. It doesn't always look the same. It doesn't always mean that I'm, you know, clinically depressed. It just means I go through bouts of depression, and it's been on and off for a long time. It's something, like I've always had anxiety. That's something that I've had my whole life. But past that, I think the death kind of pushed that over the edge,
Mhm.
and like kind of like you, when I go through moments where I'm like, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. And then I'll go through like a week, I'm like, oh, I've been really funky this week, right? And then you get through another week of being really funky, and you just kind of you toss it up to everything, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
it's the weather. Oh, it's just been a shitty week. Oh, it's just been, like I really had a fucked up day with my spouse today, or my mom's pissing me off, or my brother, whatever it is, right? Like,
Mhm.
and you just kind of keep pushing it aside that it's other things. But I think eventually for myself, for you, and I'm sure anybody listening and watching this, eventually there's that light bulb moment where you're just like, okay, this is not okay anymore. I've been
Yeah.
on this stretch of road for far too long. You know, I'm driving and there hasn't been that like rest area sign coming up anywhere. So I'm in the middle of nowhere. I need to find a way to turn around and figure out where to go next. And so I think in your case, in my case, that's usually the, you know, I kind of have a combination of things that I do, right? Like when I feel myself going for more than 3 weeks in this funk, I start to exercise, force myself to go out more, right? I'm like, all right, it's time to start doing
Mm-hmm.
hikes again with the dog. She'll love that. I'll love that. And my mental health loves that, right? But
Yeah.
if that doesn't work, if all the things that I do that I normally would to try and get myself out of that funk, because like I said, for me, it's just funks sometimes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then mental health counselors are the ones that have to kind of step in. And that was the case for you.
Before, I even considered heading to a mental health counselor. I had to reach out to my nearest and dearest, which was my best friend Sharice. She pretty much got me started with that because she's like outspoken, and she was like, Chris, you feel like there's something wrong. She said, ain't nothing wrong with going to mental health counselor. She was like, they used to tell us, Black folks that, going to mental health counselors was pretty much out of the ordinary. You keep your business to yourself. You keep that between you and God and church and whatnot. Let God deal with it. And I'm like, well, that really doesn't, solve anything. She said, yeah, I know. She said, there is nothing wrong with it. She was like, if you have to go on medicine, she was like, go ahead and do it. She was like, fuck what everybody else thinks. She's like, this is what it is. She was like, at least you're, dealing with it. I got to like looking just very hesitant, very, just scared out of my wits because I didn't know what to expect. So at work, we had like our little employee program and whatnot, and they gave you like 5 sessions. So I said, I'll give, this stuff some thought because mentally I was not in a good place, and I had to do something about it because I'm not that type of person that, that stays down all the time. I stay, keep my distance, but, I just, I had to go and talk to somebody. So I ended up finding this lady. She was based out of Texas because there was no one locally. Everybody has been going through so much that it was a 6 month to a year wait list here at home in Kentucky. And I'm still trying to get somebody locally, to talk to. Because their wait list is so backed up. I found this lady in Texas, and ironically, her name was Martha Stewart. I'm like, go figure. And so she's like, just call me Dr. Marty. First session, I was kind of hesitant to just like release everything like all at once. So I just kind of like gradually like went in, talked about the issues, dealing with race at work, the social justice protests, the not being successful enough or good enough, just kind of built up over our sessions. And she pretty much said, it's okay. She was like, you can let your defenses down. You can talk freely. She was like, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to listen. I may sprinkle some, little nuggets on you that you might enjoy, like some little videos that give you daily encouragement and whatnot. And I guess every session it got better because we like built like little goals that I wanted to meet. It started with, okay, well, maybe I should start saying no a little bit more because I overextended myself a whole lot because I was helping my nieces and nephews with like their NTI because the school was closed, and then I would like go straight to work. So, my days would begin at, like 8 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes not end until, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock by the time I got home from work. And it
2 a.m. by the way. Let's clarify that for 2 a.m. We're talking about very long hours at work and
so that became a lot. So I had to like kind of like ease them back a little bit because I was finding that I was giving all of myself away to other people and not, replenishing myself. So that was the root of everything. It's like, stop overextending yourself and, giving so much of yourself away. So Dr. Marty, she was a champion on that. She was like, CJ, you got this. You can do this. She was like, you can make it through. So, as our time that we spent talking, it was like 45 minutes, not like hours and hours like I had expected. But that time that I had for me to like kind of openly address, things that helped a lot.
I love that. You had like what is it? A Martha Stewart fairy godmother. It almost sounds like Dr. Marty sounds amazing. I love her. I'm with you. I remember going through different psychologists on my journey of trying to just better myself when I'd go into longer periods of funk. And unlike you, my first try was not like Martha Stewart, right? Like I had a lot of duds on the way, and it's discouraging, and it's so necessary just to keep going, because it really is like dating. I think that, finding a therapist is like dating. Keep going. The first one doesn't have to float your boat, right? Like that's okay. Keep going. Find somebody else. There's males, there's females, like there, if you're religious, there's religious counselors, there's counselors that are out there for the LGBTQ community, and there's somebody out there for you, for your specific needs, and then therapy is also like this. It's not like a one-shot wonder where like, you're like, oh, I go in there and I'm just going to talk. No, there's different forms of therapy too, right? Like I remember at my lowest being in Louisiana and stepping into, I ended up Googling a trauma specialist, because I'm like, I'm fucked up. Like, that's it. Like I'm crying all the time. I'm going into work. I'm sitting in the parking lot and I'm bawling my eyes out for an hour before I'm even walking into the building. And then I have to redo my fucking makeup. So now I'm pissed, right? I'm going in, I'm having this shitty experience at work. I'm smiling through, love doing my job, but having a shitty experience regardless. And I finally got to therapy, and I looked at this therapist, right? I have my hands crossed over, and I'm like, I'm fucked up. If you can't help me at this point, there's no fucking hope for me. Like that was it, right? Like I just didn't sugarcoat it. I don't even know if I could curse at a therapist, right? Like that's where I was. I remember my therapist's name was Mark, wonderful therapist. I mean, anybody in the Louisiana area, I cannot sing this man's praises more than I've always said this to everybody. And we tried a different form of therapy for me, and it was EMDR. And it was wonderful. It was life-changing. CJ, I left that day from the office like I felt 100 pounds lighter. I didn't even realize how much I was carrying inside of me, right? Because I mean, and like you said, it's like, it's things that come up over time, right? That like you kind of push aside. No, that's not what I'm dealing with today. No, I'm not dealing with that. And so I think, just kind of keep going until you find your own wow moment.
Exactly.
And that's kind of sounds like, and for, it looks different for everybody, right? Like I said,
absolutely.
For you, it was like, it needed to build that trust. It almost sounds right. Like, cause you're kind of like teetering. Do I trust this person? Do I not? On my end, I was just so skeptical at this point of therapy. I was like, it just doesn't work. Like that's it. It doesn't work. I'm not meant to be okay. And I had to be okay with not being okay. And I didn't want to be okay with not being okay, because I remember being okay, right? Like, but I think the other takeaway that really comes to mind when you speak about this is this loneliness in the Black community that you talked about, and the topic of mental health. Growing up Polish in a very Polish neighborhood, I have to say, our experiences with mental health are not very different, because our Polish community is not very open to talking about mental health. We don't, like to go to therapy, or if we do, we really keep it close to the vest, right? It's not something we tell people, because then they look at you like you're crazy. So we don't tell people we go to therapy. We don't tell people that, there are problems at home. And then there's a lot of problems at home, right? Like, I mean, us Polish people, we've got alcoholism in the family for most families. We've got, other issues, abuse. We don't talk about these traumas often enough. And so like you, I think when we were going to the suicide support groups after my father died, we had only one, I should say, Black man going to these support groups with us. And he would talk a lot about the struggles of how the Black community just did not understand how his friend could commit suicide. And he was there trying to just, better himself and understand it as well. And I think that was the first time when I felt so much less alone in sharing, and him sharing with us
Mhm.
that, like, the Black community is so put off by talking about mental health, because that's what I experienced, this isolation and this loneliness when my dad committed suicide of, you know, our Polish culture doesn't want to talk about it. And it wasn't
Mhm.
until my dad died when people would come up to us and they were like, oh, we that's when people started opening up for the first time. That was the
Yeah.
thing. Like, that was the
Yeah.
phenomenon of it. It was like, we don't talk about mental health, but like, now that you've experienced mental health, let us kind of go to you, because it seems like you're like you're our sounding board for everything mental health related. This podcast, this video blog is the reason why we're doing it is because these conversations need to be had, because this shit is serious, right? Like, it's so isolating. And
It's very serious. When we finally got back together at work, I talked to like a lot of people who I hadn't seen in more than 18 months. And the first thing they talked about was their
mm,
mental health. They were like, "We're still not in a good place. We're still having issues." You know, I don't think we fully processed what really happened,
mhm.
over this last 18 months and things that are, still happening now. For me to hear that from like some of my colleagues, especially, the male colleagues, it was
Mhm.
eye-opening for me because we never had, those kind of, intimate conversations. It's like, how do you approach this, with the colleague? Because, you don't want to become, the gossip, the fodder, that people spread around
Right.
the whole office talk. I felt
And in a
comfortable,
newsroom, by the way, the tea is always flowing.
very flowing. It's
There
piping
is
hot.
more drama and there is more tea flowing than I've ever seen in any other profession, by the way. And I've worked quite a few.
Yeah, you didn't want to become the subject of that. So, when you get these conversations, you're very apprehensive at first, but when you see that people are coming from a genuine place, then
Mhm.
that's when, the walls they like fall down and you have those good heart to hearts. And you know, I was luckily to have one of those good heart to hearts with one of my male colleagues because, I'm always expressing myself to like all the ladies because, their ears are always open. Well, select few, but yeah, it just felt good. It just felt good to, just put that out there that yes, I'm going through a mental health struggle. I see that you're going through a mental health struggle. We can get through this together by talking and figuring out ways, to how to deal with it.
What do you think the fear is, other than like society telling us or our communities telling us that, we shouldn't be talking about it? Past that, what do you think is the actual fear of opening up and saying, I'm not okay? And that has to be okay for a moment.
It has to deal with the masculinity and the shame and because guys are supposed to be macho and we don't talk about this or that, and I'm like, that is so not the case. Just the shame and having people knowing your business. I just think that's probably like the fear that people are, they're so apprehensive of sharing because of that.
Like you said, people are afraid that, hey, if I open my mouth to talk about this, then I become the gossip instead of getting the help that we need. And really, when we open the conversation up to mental health, what we realize, so often when I have conversations with people who just, I guess I see that they're struggling, but they may not be talking about that struggle.
Mhm.
They think depression is one thing. They think it only looks one way. They think depression is just a one-way highway to suicide, right? And
Mhm.
that's not the case. You
No.
weren't suicidal at any point, were you?
Oh, absolutely not. Now me, different because I have all these people to live for. I have like the next generation of coming up, and they look to me for their inspiration. And I could never think about taking myself out like that. That's something that never came across my mind.
I've been at very lows in my life, and then I've been at very highs in my life. At my lowest, I can't say that I ever thought about taking my own life, but I can say that there were times when living was optional, right? I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily want to get up the next day to kind of feel that pain and continue to like go through this mental torture that I was going through. And it wasn't until
Mhm.
therapy and until I opened up and said, I've never actually dealt with some of the trauma that I've been through. I've never actually dealt or spoken about kind of what these emotions are and how do you sort through them. And again, I wasn't crazy. I had just been through something,
Yeah.
right? And then I
Yeah.
decided, I thought that the best way to deal with it was to move 3,000 miles away and just kind of trek around the world and,
Mhm.
make friends everywhere. And it's been a wonderful experience, but it's come with a whole other slew of problems, right? And then being back in New York City is a whole other issue in itself that I wasn't ready or prepared to handle or take on.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, again, depression looks so different for everybody, right? Like there's mild cases, there's very extreme cases, there are,
Mhm.
medication is out there, there's help out there, hotlines are out there, toll-free therapists are out there, Zoom therapists. You don't even have to leave your house anymore. Like
No.
everything you need is at your
Mhm.
fingertips. And it's really just opening that conversation and saying, we can talk about depression and it's okay. Like I'm not going to
Yeah.
look at you different. I'm not, like you're not a teacup, you're not going to break. No, you're just going through some freaking shit.
I kind of see myself as a people person, and I feel that everybody's got their something, and you never know what somebody is going through. So
Mhm.
I always make it a point, whether I like you or not. The first thing I ask, how are you?
Amen.
And it may open a conversation, it may not, but at least getting that out there makes gives people the sense that you actually care about how they're doing, how their day might be going. It might not be going so well, but at least you offer that just to be courteous and kind.
Absolutely. I love that you said that because so many people who are going to be listening and watching this, um, we in this time right now, 2021, 2020 was brutal. 2021 is no better. Let's be honest. 2021
No.
came back swinging and it might be slightly better, but it really comes with a whole other set of issues that people weren't expecting, right? Like the side effects of what happened in 2020. And
Right.
those are just as serious as the stuff that was happening in 2020. We could all use a little bit more compassion. We could all use a little bit more grace. And we could all
Mhm.
use that stranger sometimes, funny enough, I reached out to somebody that we worked with at HAS, and it's somebody that I don't like, right? Like somebody that me and her, we hated each other for the 2 years that we were there. So we're going to spill some tea. She's going to be on the podcast. And we are talking exactly about this, right? About the fact that you don't have to like each other to know that people are going through something. And
Mhm.
just that moment and that raft, just throwing it out there and saying, I'm here if you need to talk, because you know what? At the end of the day, the only thing that makes us human and that only thing that keeps, I guess, humanity and everybody else kind of cohesive and working together is these shared experiences.
Exactly. Exactly. And you just never know when you're going to need a person. So it's like, be kind.
Mhm.
If you see somebody going through a breakdown, you might not have the greatest relationship with them. Be kind. Extend your hand, because I just say that, you never know. You might be on the top, but you will always see those faces that, you may likely ignore, coming back down. So you might need each other one day. And it's
You
like,
never know. Listen, life works in such mysterious ways. Like I said, I'm back in New York City. That is a whole mystery to me. And you know what? Like I said, it's been a love-hate relationship being back as well. So again, it all plays with your mental health, right? And whether it's small situations,
Mhm,
big
mhm,
situations, life-altering situations,
yeah,
some way, shape, or form, everybody is going to go through a situation that's going to test your mental health.
yeah,
And just go out there, seek the help, talk to a friend. You had Cherie, you said Cherie's the
yeah, Sharice, yeah,
Cherise.
Sharice,
Cherise, I mean, what a wonderful friend that we all wish we had, right? That like
yeah,
somebody who was such a champion for you to say, hey, CJ or Chris, or just go. Fuck what everybody else thinks. Go and get the help you need, because you know what? People are going to talk about you more when you're fucked
mhm,
up than when you go
yeah,
get help. And then they're like,
yeah,
oh, well, now I don't have anything to talk about her or him or
yeah,
whatever, right? Like that's the
yeah.
thing. They lose interest once you're okay.
Yeah, after going through that experience, I'm still going through it. I'm not all
Mhm.
the way completely done because everybody is a work in progress. I just feel a little bit better. um, COVID has shown me, that people are less kind. People, are all about themselves. But at the end of the day, it's shown me that regardless of that, we all need each other,
Yes.
like point blank to the period. I never, would have thought that me, the strong one, the responsible one, would end up, just breaking down and falling apart. But I will say that it's made me a stronger individual. And I think now that I'm in my 40s, it's made me just say what I feel instead of, internalizing a whole lot of stuff because me, I bite my tongue and I just like move it on because I don't have time for it. I just throw that by the wayside. But now, this new CJ, I like me because I say what I feel, and that's it. It's like take it or leave it, relax, relate, release, and that's it.
CJ, let's talk a little bit about this process of going to therapy, or kind of this process right before you got to therapy, because I think so often we kind of skim over that, where people don't realize that even before, I guess, you take the steps to help yourself, this is a messy process. Like, this is not a cookie cutter process. I kind of go back for myself into the moment when, like, I left my abusive relationship, right, and my marriage, and I was much better for leaving it. But when I came back, a lot of things popped up that I was not aware that I needed to deal with from this, like the repercussions of this relationship. And that process, those months before I went to seek help, before I was able to do that, they were messy. They were messy for everybody. It really affected not only me, but it affected everybody around me. So talk to me about kind of what your relationship was like with your family in this time, because, I know your family. I know your sister. I know your mother. I know your father. I know all your brother. I know your family. We've had Thanksgiving together. So, and then some. So, but I know that, the journey that you're on, that may be so messy, it bleeds onto other people in your family as well.
It does. And, I would say for them, I would never do anything to damage my relationship with my folks because I feel like family is all that you have. There would be days that going through it, I would like snap, and that's unlike me. I don't snap at people. I always care about the feelings of other people, but there would be times where I would snap at maybe at one of my sisters or my brothers, but I would go back and apologize later because that's just not in my spirit to do that.
You're much better than me, by the way.
I
have a hard time apologizing, so I'm kind of like the dog that comes back. I'm like, hi, just love me again.
Well, that's the Capricorn nature, because Capricorns can be stubborn. Sometimes you have to eat that humble pie. You have to eat it and, just take a big gulp. I talked to my mom and dad about it. They were like, it's okay not to be okay. It took them a while to get used to because, my parents, they never put anything, out in the open, like that. It's like your business is your business, and you keep your business to yourself and you have less problems to worry about. And I think that, has a lot, it's a generational thing, because when I, asked about family issues with like my grandparents, my paternal and maternal grandparents, they were left in the dark on a lot of stuff. So it just seems like it just filtered down to every generation. And I'm like, no, we got to break that apart. Everybody was receptive, because I think the first time when I said that I was going through like mental health issues, I texted all of my brothers and sisters, and it's like 6 of us. So everybody was supportive, surprisingly. They
I
were
love
like,
it.
if you feel like something that isn't right with you, you deal with that before trying to go on to something else, because it could spill over,
Mhm.
into whether it be a new job, new relationship, so on and so forth.
I think we are the generation, even though we are not the same age, but we are the
Mhm,
generation of people who say, we're going to break these generational curses of these
mhm.
cycles that our families, our parents, and I think that they did the best that they could, right? Like your family,
Yeah.
my family, I don't put any blame on anybody, but I think at the end of the
No.
day, even in our family, we were a very open family that communicated a lot about
Mhm,
everything. So there was never a topic
mhm.
that was off the table in our family.
Yeah.
I was never afraid of my parents to call them about things. On the contrary, like my friends would call my parents, right? Like they were the parents that everybody
Mhm,
talked to.
mhm.
Um, and yet when the suicide happened for us, it was such a shock. And, my mom, my brother, and I, we don't hide the fact of what we've been through. We deal with it in different ways, but we don't hide it. And it wasn't until I started talking to my grandmother and like everybody else on in like our Poland family, and trying to come up with, just I guess, explanations as to what happened. Is this
Mhm.
something that happens in our family? Is this something, generational? There was a lot of kind of a pushback of like, we don't talk about this, so you shouldn't be
Yeah.
asking that, don't overstep. And it is time to overstep.
Mhm.
That's it. Like, this is the time to overstep. There's
Yeah.
no more, pussyfooting around this, because
Yeah.
why? Why? It's going to make you better. It's going to make me better. It's going to make the next person better. Like, if
Yeah.
I know what I'm getting into, if I know that this is a problem that I have genetically, that I could pass along to my family, that I could pass along to my kids, I want to know how to help them. I want to know how to help me.
Exactly.
Why
Yeah.
not do that?
Yeah. And I think that was like one of the greatest lessons, that I've learned. I kind of interconnected the family genealogy with mental health. There was like a lot of internalized trauma that was like never shared. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I had to poke and prod family elders to find out what exactly happened, why certain family members weren't speaking to each other, why one family member was ostracized for practicing a different religion that caused like more conflict. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, we never knew any of this happened until
Until you
I
start
got,
asking the questions.
yeah, it just made me have one of those big Oprah aha moments. So I'm like, okay, you know, so I see where some of this, internalized trauma or, the depression and all of this stuff, I can see how it filters down and
Mm-hmm.
how it's never been fully addressed. That, and talking to the therapist about, some of that stuff, I'm like, it brought me almost full circle, not all the way there yet.
A work in progress. You said it
Work in
best. That's
progress, work in
it.
progress.
You,
So
I, everybody out there, we're all works in progress.
openly discussing stuff a little bit more, I feel like that was one of the things that, my entire family does not like really like deal with. I just feel like talking more, that kind of help me through my process.
For anybody out there who's listening, specifically, I think I want to address communities, the Black community, communities like the Polish community, or communities that are just very anti talking about mental health. What is your message to anybody in those communities who is kind of struggling and feels very alone in this entire process?
My message for a person who would be going through something like this, I would, you just can't say seek help, but keep you excuse me, keep you a good support system, around you. If you have a person that you can confide in, that you can trust with like your information, or maybe even going through something similarly as you, um try to talk out as much as you can. Try to be expressive, give, I don't want to say give warning signs, but just kind of alert people that you're not in an okay place.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like that when you are more open and more honest with everything, I just feel like things could be much better, because all the suicide and stuff, no, there's got to be a better way. But you never know the extent of what someone is going through. So I would say, you know, get a good circle around you. Find a good therapist if they happen to be African American, or whatever. Just get the help.
I said this before. I think that not that you lucked out, but I think you had a wonderful support system. Like I said, I know your family. They are wonderful and loving. And I don't think that if you had approached them good or bad, they would have,
Oh
responded any
yeah.
differently. Like they would have loved you through this anyways. And I
Yeah.
realized that not everybody has that, right? Like I realized that
No.
that is not the case for everybody. So I think my message also to anybody out there who's kind of in this situation is if at first you don't succeed, keep going, right? Like if the first person that you kind of approach that you think might be the person who is receptive and they're not, don't get discouraged because you don't know who that person is that may come,
Mhm.
on your path, on your journey. And I think, throughout this podcast, I keep, I do the introductions to everybody and how we met. And so many of them are by chance that these people are total strangers that come into your life that will save you literally without knowing that you needed that saving at the time. So I think just be open to telling your story, be open to kind of going out there and having a raw
Yeah.
conversation with somebody and saying, hey, something in here is not okay. I'm not okay. And that's okay.
And that's okay. Yes, and that's okay.
CJ, I love you. Thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add that I have not asked? This was what an incredible conversation that kind of roller coastered into so many different topics because I think they're relatable on so many, whether it's something a small, something small in it that you kind of picked up on or a big topic all around. I think it really speaks to anything and anyone and everyone really on so many different levels. So
Mhm.
anything else that you wanted to add that I have not asked that you think is worth
No,
noting?
I just want to end, as I said earlier, everybody's got their something. And, if you see somebody, be kind, be courteous, ask them how they're doing. How in the health are you?
How in the health are you? I love that. Oh my gosh. I may have to is this stealing if I tell you I'm going to use that with everybody now?
Look, I don't care.
I'll give you credit, so it's not stealing. We'll put a little, caption over it like we do in news. There's ways around it to credit it. CJ, you have been wonderful. Thank you for coming on the show, and thank you everyone for listening. CJ Daniels, everybody.